Mr. Clagett, welcome back to the program. Thank you for being with us this week. And we're going to let Paul Fanner run the interview for the next 25 minutes.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Francisque. And hello, John Clagett.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for putting this together.
Well, it's my privilege to spend some time with you. I want to give full disclosure to our audience. I, Paul Fenner, am a Trans Am fan from day one. The first time I ever saw a road race in person was a Trans Am race. I love the series, and I particularly appreciate you, John Clagett. Aside from being a good friend, you have been a central figure in bringing this sport back to where it needs to be in the public eye. And Trans Am is now gaining stature and gaining momentum with every season, and we're going to talk about that today. So thank you for all you do for the sport. I think that
thank you. And one of the things that's most interesting when I talk to my competitors is most of them were fans like you and me at one point in their life, and when they were able to put together racing programs, they steered their individual efforts to Trans Am.
Well, I can see why. After watching your races, there's not, just by way of background, if you haven't seen a modern Trans Am race, what you're seeing in so many ways in the Trans Am class itself, not the TA2 class, which has its own allure, but the Trans Am class they really are these effectively unrestricted high horsepower beasts. They're cruise missiles. And watching them accelerate and watching them perform and be driven, they're cars that are being manhandled or women-handled in some cases very well, and they're spectacular. There's just no doubt that the driver is doing the work when you watch these cars. And is that underneath the philosophy of what you're doing, John, with the series? Is this driver forward?
For sure, one of the underlying philosophies of it was to create a series that was attainable with today's, racing budgets on a non-factory level.
Yeah.
And so our niche is that niche. And then if you kind of drill down one step from there, purpose-built tube frame silhouette race cars was being underappreciated by the car manufacturers in 2010 and on. And it created that opportunity for us to say, that's going to be our niche. And, I'm paying homage to the Trans Am of 1968 on my backdrop there.
That's actually 69.
So let's not get confused as to what the modern day looks like.
Yeah.
The modern day is contemporary bodied race cars, 200 mile per hour. And as you alluded to, no driver aids, no traction control, and it's mano a mano style racing. No sharing the cockpit, no 200, 300 mile races. It's 100 mile sprint races. Man and machine against man and machine, and as well as Amy Ruman and others that have joined us on the female side.
I will add. I refer to as the champ because she is, and she earned that. And I think that that's what's so incredible about this series is that the story of this series is at the heart of the story of American road racing, and that picture you have behind you, I believe, is the 1969 season. I recognize it because that was the year I first went to a Trans Am race. I was at the season finale in Riverside. And what I saw that day was something that's never quite been matched in my expectations since, because the cars looked like real cars. And I see that now when I go to your races. Even though these are tube frame race cars, especially the TA2 cars, they have the visual appeal in a pretty unfiltered way. They look like a Camaro, a Mustang, or a Challenger. They look like the road car, and they're not overly styled or overly stretched. And how important is that to the the business model of Trans Am.
Well, very, very important, Paul. I think if you go back and say, what were all the series around in 1960? Or those that came around in the 70s and 80s and 90s? And what's the one series that has survived the test of time?
Right.
And that is the Trans Am series. That is the answer. The Trans Am series as the test of time and racing peaks and valleys, the Trans Am is there. And at this point in time, I almost consider where we are in 2022 as a new chapter where a lot of incredibly good things are going to be coming on our way, including a full season TV package for Trans Am and TA2 again in 2022. Details to be announced soon as one of the things that it's going to be really cool for fans.
And I will admit that I have foreknowledge of this package, and I am so excited. Fantastic, John. And I can't wait till the rest of the world knows about this, because this is something that should not be a secret. If you watch a Trans Am race, I think you're a fan forever. And I watched a Trans Am race this May. Came from Indianapolis, left on Carb Day and got to Indianapolis to watch the Trans Am on Saturday. And I watched a spectacular race. It was a wet race, but I literally stood on that hillside and didn't move, watching not only a great race, but just watching in awe of how good the drivers are and how they were dealing with these incredibly tough conditions and these really fast cars. And when you look at this, you've got this platform now that you've worked so hard to build. It's starting to attract some real talent from other forms of racing. Your current champion is a former IMSA champion, Chris Dyson. You had your...
Yeah, when we took the Trans Am brand and started to build it, it was 2011 under this ownership group. And there was a executive in Motorsports that came up to me really early on, and he said, "Can I ask one question, John?" I go, "Sure, go ahead." He goes, "Why did anybody think Trans Am was worth saving?" And I was like taken aback by that, but it also offered me a personal challenge for the next 8, 9 years now at this point. And to that, I think, again, it's the test of time where we put some basics in place. An interesting formula that had been underprescribed, attainable budgets for teams without factory support, bucket list racetracks that people wanted to go to, and then a novel concept that sometimes get lost, treating our customers or our competitors as customers, and rule stability so that we weren't redoing the rule book and costing competitors more money every year. And I think that's maybe the secrets of our success. And in the case of TA2, we were able to harness that from almost its birth in 2011, putting things in place like a specific list of chassis builders, a specific list of engine builders, so that as it grew successful, the success wasn't going to be part of its demise, meaning the demand for more and more competitors ultimately leads to greed from people who are providing rides to that group. We were able to kind of control all of that. And it was maybe dumb luck that formula emulated the Xfinity series formula as far as power to weight, where it started to attract NASCAR kids. Ty Dillon was the very first to come and say, "Hey, there's something here in TA2 that's helping me build my racecraft. And now 20 some NASCAR kids later, it seems like we've just got a lot of momentum there. And having those kind of kids attracted the top and up and coming sports car kids. And it has been this kind of confluence of all these, wherever you are planning to go or where you came from, TA2 has become an amazing competition. 52 cars on the grid at COTA for our season finale.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome, John. And I think that for those who are not familiar with Trans Am, and even I thought I was familiar with Trans Am, and then I showed up in this a couple years back at Sebring, and I remember just walking through what seemed like an endless paddock with a lot of race cars, and looking at the depth of the teams and the kind of elevated professionalism, even though you're controlling costs. This is a real professional racing series. It looks frontline when you walk through your paddock. And the cars are beautifully presented, well prepared. Drivers I've heard of, either coming up or established talent. What is the class structure? Just explain it to somebody who walks into the paddock for the first time, because I think we have many people who are...
There are 5 classes of competition. The top 2 are purpose-built tube-frame race cars with silhouette bodies. The Trans Am class is your 850 horsepower monsters that are capable of easily 200 miles per hour, and 18-inch tires and wheels are coming to the series in 2022, courtesy of Pirelli.
Yep.
The tire testing has been completed. It was a home run success.
Right.
So we're going to see lap times improve by 2 or 3 seconds on probably almost any given circuit. They're faster, but they're also a lot more drivable. The 16-inch tire was really designed for other racing series, and it had a little bit of roll as cars were going through corners. Very hard to drive. On the 18-inch platform, it has smoothed that out, and they're just really going to be a great tire for the class. TA2 looks very similar to TA. Mustangs, Camaros, Challengers is the pure focus there. 530 horsepower cars or engines, and 3 chassis builders, so it's very regimented. Cost caps on a lot of pieces and parts, a very affordable Pirelli radial tire, and racing budgets that can come in at $300,000 for the year. I mean, yes, I said $300,000 for the year for a major pro championship that features 30 guys that are capable of moving on in their careers in a very short amount of time. The 3 production classes are called Extreme GT, Super GT, and GT. So it's really just varying degrees of performance, with the XGT being your Audi R8s and things like that, Porsche's 911 Turbo Cups cars. Super GT is a step below that, but still tuner shop prepared. And then GT cars are the least of the performance window, really more of a club, SCCA club racing crossover, where not a lot of what I would say tune shop, just low level performance enhancements.
Got it. And then when I'm at a race, I walk in and I see the TA2 race is a standalone event, and the TA race at most events has a combined field, correct?
Yes, that's the format. Both of those being 100-mile race format, unless there's some sort of time constraints to a race weekend. Most of our race weekends are with a component that they're called Speed Tour.
Yes.
They have a SVRA historic component, which often includes cars like that I have in my backdrop.
Yes.
as Group 10. And most of our weekends are going to have Formula FR, the Formula Regional Championship that's based on F3, and then the F4 Championship that's FIA part of the world system. So you throw that all together, and honestly, if you can't find something there as a race fan that you're attracted to, then you must not like racing, because there's car shows with 500 cars, parades for those cars, open wheel racing, our cutthroat Trans Am racing, and then vintage racing. It's a little bit of everything, and it seems to be for sure something that's growing in interest, because year to year, even with COVID, our attendance numbers just continue to go up and up, to the point where at a place like Watkins Glen, you're almost looking at a full infield, and you're scratching your head going, wow, this is amazing. You know, a line of cars all the way down to the village. And Mike Printup once grabbed me. He grew up in Detroit, and he grew up watching Trans Am downtown.
Yeah.
Formula One, and he's been a fan ever since. So you just never know where you're going to find your fan base.
Well, that's a good lead into another question I'm going to have for you here. To come back to that one in a minute, put a marker down. But you just touched on something, is that there's some promotion budget obviously going against this to grow this audience. But you've been doing this with effectively with a fraction of the resources that a NASCAR or an IndyCar or any other top-level professional series has, yet it's happening anyhow. The audience is finding you, and we see it on racer.com. I don't know if you've paid much attention, but the share counts on your stories, and we see the page views, especially when we have quote, drivers that are crossover from other places that have fan base and they're well known. They're elevating the other drivers in your series by being in your series. And just watching the world react to Ernie Francis Jr.'s performance in the SRX series this year was heartwarming, because we've all seen him in Trans Am and know what he has. He's something very special. When you look at all this, what is the goal? Because you've devoted your life to the series, bringing it to this point. It's on the cusp of another big step forward. What do you want to do with this? Where is it going?
Well, I think my whole thing since 2011 might be considered baby steps that you could afford to take, and every year to increase the budget and throw it right back into the series and continue to build it. So ultimately the goal is to find a title sponsor that would like to put some serious money into this, that can then be parlayed into significant increases in the prize money to make our competitors give them the opportunity to build their budgets up. But it's just, I think over a 10-year period, just taking incremental steps, there's probably 100 more steps I'd like to take as the budget allows. And
right.
Ultimately, today's world of digital platform and finding your fan base is a lot more affordable than it used to be, where you had to do a broad shotgun approach, spending tons of money in the market to attract.
Agreed.
And now you can target it very carefully, and I think it makes a difference.
It sure does. And again, you can just see it in the engagement numbers here. And I think that you've also, your drivers have some sass to them. They generate a little heat on social. I think that's always good. And where I think that, I'm going with this is that, do you see yourself back on is one of your goals to be back on a weekend like Detroit Grand Prix, now that it's back downtown? Is that, you were there with TA2 not long ago? Is that an ultimate goal of yours?
clearly, the with that goal also comes, you know, the how do you do all this stuff? Where you know, we did break out and go to the Music City Grand Prix in 2021. Clearly, in my mind, biased as it is, it was the best show of the weekend, and a firm commitment to bring us back is in place. So we're going back to Music City, an incredible event. Detroit, I don't. Yes, for sure. Detroit is the home of you know, automotive industry for the America, and it needs to be the home of Trans Am racing. We're in, you know, I don't want to, you know, take a confidentialities, but ultimately when the Grand Prix returns to the streets near downtown, maybe there's going to be an opportunity for Trans Am to go back there. I have an annual conversation with Jim McKellian at Long Beach. So it's just taking the opportunities, seeing how they work against our 25 race package that is the speed tour, and then figuring out what makes sense to the competitors. And that's, you know, number one thing is I got to keep the team budgets that they can work with.
Right.
I could have 20 races right now. It's, you know, it's just, you know, where my teams our sweet spot is 11 or 12 races. So that sweet spot can go up if I increase prize money. So that's the formula.
That is the formula. And you know, again, your restraint is admirable. Your discipline in managing this series is admirable. You haven't been talked out of what you know works. And you've also been willing to experiment in some areas, you know, successfully and sometimes not successfully, but you've learned. You know, racing is learning, so you're learning. You now have a different relationship with SCCA Pro going forward, and you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. You know, I would, you know, the illusion of things that don't work, we learned that in 2021 with the subscription-based live stream.
Yeah.
So we're aborting that and going back to a free live stream. Fans ought to love that opportunity to see
Thank
us
you.
live stream most all of our events, and that'll integrate to YouTube and all the other platforms around the world that are interested in having Trans Am on their social media platform. So that's coming as well. The SCCA component, my mentor and owner of Trans Am, Tony Perella, has orchestrated a deal for SCCA Pro Racing to now be part of the Perella Motorsports Holdings companies. And it won't really, probably to a common fan, be any different at all. There's some things that will streamline us in internal operations, but I don't see it being something that a race fan's going to notice the difference with that being part of the family. But we have a 25-year relationship with SCCA that's the marketing rights to Trans Am, Formula 4, FR, and SCCA Pro are now all integrated into a multi-decade relationship. So all of this will just continue to grow and prosper, and we're not going anywhere.
Well, that's great, and that's where we met each other, was when you were running the communications end of SCCA Pro Racing, when we were both, I think you were 9 years old and I was 10. But
indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. So, but one of the things I think that really strikes me about Trans Am, when you're in a paddock, it's pure. The people there are there because they simply want to race without the BS. There's a lot of, I feel chamber music going on when you walk into many paddocks around the world. And I run into a lot of people. They're just there to race. There's not a lot of posing going on. There's people want to strap into these rockets and go race each other, and then they get along for the most part. And
that's the thing that, I thought racing was like that everywhere, but it's not. And Trans Am has had that since it is a family environment.
yeah,
And I think, obviously it's a cliche that the families are in their individual paddock spots, but we have 50 families that meld together, and it's sometimes, it's heartwarming to see that on the racetrack they're out there to, beat their competitor, but if you get off the racetrack and you're missing a piece and part to make to the next session, there's going to be somebody in the paddock to help you.
yeah.
And that's, that started with Jack Roush as the factory monster that didn't have to help anybody, but he did.
Yeah.
He helped all the independents that needed help, and to the point of even he would take his crew and go help an independent fix their car if it broke. And that's been there for as long as I've been there, and I think that's awesome.
And that's the spirit, I think, of the Trans Am that's kept me, and that was what got me so enthralled with it in the beginning. And I want to thank you on behalf of all us fans of the Trans Am for keeping it going, and also to Tony for his emotional and financial commitment to this series to make it the thing that it deserves to be. And congratulations to all of your 2021 Trans Am champions. They're part of a great story now.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about Trans Am today.
Always love talking about Trans Am, John.
Thank you very much, John, for being with us today.
The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to EPARTRADE.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
There are two types of people, racers and everyone else. Racer Magazine is for those who believe that racing is a way of life. Racer embodies the excellence that defines a sport driven by passion, courage, and ingenuity. Get 1 year of both Racer's print and digital edition for only $39 with instant access to our entire digital issue archive. Subscribe now at info.racer.com.